Absolutely. And Colonel, I want to ask you a military question, something that a lot of people have been talking about for some time, and I wonder if you can shed some light on this. Now, Israel is a campaign of air raids on the Gaza Strip, has been dropping bunker buster bombs to try and destroy the tunnels that Hamas operates from. But we know for a fact that Hamas has been hiding the hostages inside of these tunnels. Is there any way that Israel could have confirmed that its bunker buster bombs on these Hamas tunnels were not killing the Israeli hostages?
Probably not. First off, when this is all said and done, the beauty of, from a military perspective, analyzing Israel, is that it is a democracy, a flawed one, but it is a democracy. And so all the facts will get out. I think what we'll find is there's probably been less aerial bombardment of tunnels than we expect at the moment. Mm-hmm. I think that the Israeli campaign seems to be towards aerial bombardment is at above ground facilities that are of military significance. And then their strategy seems to be to isolate the tunnels and then attack them from the ground. But clearly, the Hamas strategy has been to put, first off, the Palestinian civilian population around military facilities, and then to have the hostages there as well as a means of restraining Israeli military action. I don't know how effective that's been, but I think that's something that I will look for in the coming weeks and months.
Absolutely. And now this bout of violence started on the 7th of October when Hamas staged its unprecedented attack into Israel. 1,200 Israelis and people of other nationalities in southern part of Israel ended up losing their lives, which unleashed an Israeli response that has sparked a humanitarian catastrophe. The United Nations chief, Antonio Guterres, has described this as carnage that is unprecedented. He's described the Gaza Strip now as a graveyard of children. Speaking in terms of military terms, Israel is one of the most advanced militaries in the world. Do you think it could have done more strategic and pinpoint strikes rather than what we've witnessed over the course of the last 48 days, where virtually the whole of the northern part of the Gaza Strip has been turned into rubble? More than precision strikes, Israel seems to have prioritized maximum damage. Do you think there's a problem with that strategy?
Well, I don't know yet if the strategy was to inflict maximum damage, but the Israeli forces are
by the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant in the beginning weeks of the war. He said that the strategy of Israelis is to inflict maximum damage. He's gone on record to state it.
On Hamas, not necessarily on the civilian infrastructure of Gaza. Look, this is a problem. I mean, Israel knew the reason why Israel has not gone into Hamas in a big way before is because Hamas's military infrastructure is dispersed among the civilian infrastructure, and it's almost impossible to destroy Hamas as a military organization without inflicting this level of damage. The Israeli forces are capable of operating with a greater degree of precision, and if you compare them with, say, the Bashar al-Assad's campaign, which was both indiscriminate and deliberately targeted at civilian infrastructure, even in the absence of a military target, Israel looks a little bit better. But I think that what I've seen right now indicates that the Israelis are operating, that their standard of proportionality, the proportionality of civilian destruction inflicted versus the importance of the military target, is probably more relaxed than we'd see, say, the Western democracies, the United States and Great Britain use in the modern era.
And do you think that's an issue? Because when you say that the manner in which the Israeli military has gone about its campaign of air bombings is a bit problematic, because at the time when this conflict broke out on the 7th of October, the entire world in one voice was backing Israel. But with each passing day and with images of children being bombed, children who do not even know that they are Palestinians being bombed, and those images coming forth, the amount of support that Israel has had in the international community has eroded. Do you think that is problematic?
That is exactly right. So what you're seeing is probably tactical successes against Hamas, but they have to be balanced against the strategic damage that Israel is doing to its image in the world. I think that Israel has decided that at least for a limited time, the strategic damage is worth suffering because the tactical threat of Hamas is so great. They can't allow October 7th to happen again. But you're exactly right. The longer this campaign goes on, I think we were talking for 4 minutes before you mentioned Hamas. So it's clear that at least in the consciousness of you and many others around the world, the issue has gone from the Hamas terrorist attack to Israel's response and whether or not it's disproportionate. That's a strategic failure for Israel. And you've got to wonder how long Israel views the strategic damage as sustainable versus whatever tactical advantage they get. That's the problem with waging a technologically advanced asymmetric warfare, particularly against an enemy who chooses to embed itself in the civilian population. The narrative is not, oh, Hamas has compromised these places by operating militarily among civilian infrastructure. The narrative is Israel's responsible for these damages. Whether that's fair or not, the damage is being done to Israel, and they're suffering it, and
Militarily, Israel may win or lose, but in the perception war, Israel appears to have quite clearly lost this war. But I want to talk a bit about the hostages that have been released today. 13 Israeli nationals have been released, 10 Thai nationals and 1 Filipino national. Now, the United States has been, in a big way, a part of the diplomatic parleys that have been taking place behind the scenes. Are you surprised that no American national has been allowed to walk free today? And what does it mean to the American diplomatic efforts so far?
Well, there's a couple of conclusions we could draw. The most frightening conclusion would be that the people we're negotiating with don't have control over all the hostages. And so the hostages we're seeing released are the ones that, Hamas as an organization, Izzeddin al-Qassam Brigade holds, but that there's other organizations that operate like Palestinian Islamic Jihad that may be holding hostages and are not party to the negotiations. That's the worst case scenario, because then you may not be able to secure a deal. The second possibility, which if you assume that Hamas has control over all the hostages, it's in their interest to drag out this negotiation as long as possible, because it basically forestalls the Israeli military onslaught. What you would want to do would be to hold your high-value hostages. Those would be Israeli children, Americans, other Western nationals. Hold out those releases until the end so that you can get max benefit for them.
Do you think holding children are the high-value targets? Because I remember very clearly back in 2011 when the Hamas had Gilad Shalit, an Israeli soldier, to secure the release of this one soldier, more than 1,000 Palestinians were set free by the Netanyahu government. Does it not make more sense for Hamas to hold on to the Israeli soldiers that it has in its captivity and then try get bigger number of its own people released from the Israeli prisons rather than hold on to the Israeli children? Because it makes no sense in the perception battle here.
So they only had Gideon Shalit. They didn't have women and children at the time. I think that it makes sense for Hamas to hold on to Israeli soldiers as long as possible, because you could arguably make the case that they are prisoners of war. The women and children, on the other hand, Hamas is also suffering some reputational damage in the international community. So as long as they hold women and children, it's quite clear that those are hostages. It's quite clear that they were taking in terrorist activity contrary to any law of armed conflict. That weakens Hamas's position in the international community. So I think that those are the people they would argue over. And I think that they would release the low-value ones first, particularly non-Israeli nationals, non-Western nationals, and then get rid of the women and children, release them as quickly as possible, then go to adults. And only then, after the settling of the military issue, would they negotiate exchanging the Israeli military captives. That's just my back-of-the-envelope analysis.
Now, and also, Colonel, give us militarily, how do you look at what is likely to happen next? The first stage of this deal has gone through successfully. It's just 25% of the deal that's been agreed upon and that has been executed. But there's a lot that can still happen because it is a very delicate and a tenuous deal. For the next 3 days, one hopes that this deal, of course, goes through. But post this, do you think Benjamin Netanyahu would want to further continue with the humanitarian pause? Or is there way too much pressure on him from members of his own parliament, like, for instance, from members such as Itamar Ben-Gvir, who have condemned this deal as a disaster? They've said that it is amoral that Netanyahu has even agreed to this deal. What do you think is Netanyahu's position once this period of 4-day elapses?
Well, I don't think he's taking any counsel from Ben-Gvir. He's an outlier in what is a very broad cabinet. Netanyahu personally is in a really bad situation because, he's a flawed, arrogant, corrupt leader whose one benefit has always been that he was security. He could deliver security, and he is not. So he has to destroy Hamas. I think that the hostage negotiations hopefully will continue for a while. The hostage releases will continue. But if they break down, what you'll see is a predictable pattern where both sides will blame each other for the failure of hostage releases. And then Israel will step up military action again, because their military aims, which Netanyahu has to deliver if he has any chance of staying in power. And remember, if he leaves the prime ministership, he's going to be arrested. He's facing criminal charges. So this is not just a political issue. This is a personal issue for him. So if he does not deliver the complete destruction of Hamas as a military organization, he's in a lot of trouble. So I like to look on the sunny side of life, but this is a very, very difficult issue. And I'm afraid, once you unleash warfare, it's hard to stop.
I think you've touched the nub of this entire conflict, because at the heart of the many political aspects, there is a personal aspect for Netanyahu here, because once this war ends, that effectively finishes Netanyahu's tenure as the prime minister. And as you said, he's facing serious charges of corruption and he could end up in prison. So does it mean that for Netanyahu to stay out of prison, he would want to continue with this war for as long as he can take it?
No. The war continuing is also bad for Netanyahu, because the Israeli public is extremely casualty averse. What Netanyahu needs is to show that he has destroyed Hamas as a military organization and established a level of deterrence where the attacks of October 7th will be viewed as too risky. Right. So just as, for example, Hezbollah is deterred from launching a general attack into Israel, he has to establish that same level of deterrence with Hamas. If he can convince the Israelis of that, then he might have a political future.
My last quick question to you is, what do you think is Israel's game plan here? Because does Israel want to occupy at least a part of northern Gaza, or do you think once this war ends, the Israelis will completely go out of the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think once this war ends, the Israelis will completely leave the Gaza Strip. Israel has already dropped leaflets in southern Gaza saying, guys, the war isn't over. Don't come back to the north. So I think they're hoping that this will go on, but they view this as probably a temporary phase. Once the hostage negotiations become unproductive, I think Israel will continue its operation in North Gaza to reduce Hamas's military infrastructure. And then once they achieve that goal, I think they will move into South Gaza and start to take that. All
right. We're completely out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Colonel David DeRoche, for joining us and getting us that perspective there. These are the latest images in terms of what's been happening at this moment. This is the first significant breakthrough that has come about, where captives have been exchanged for prisoners, and we've had the very first day of relative peace in this humanitarian pause that has now been agreed upon. We'll continue tracking all the updates on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned to WION. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.